Hi everyone, this is Lily from Blue Wave Soap. Today you'll be watching me pipe the roses on top of my soap. I ended up having some technical difficulties with my phone, mainly. I am pretty short and the location of the phone was higher than my head, so I did not record the first part of making the soap. Only this. I think my finger touched the record button or off to the side, or I thought, and it never recorded. So it's kind of funny, but not really. Here I waited, I think 3 hours for the soap to be firm enough to be able to start piping on top and placing some of these roses. These roses I had piped the day before. I think these were my first attempt roses with soap, so they didn't turn out quite as pretty as the second attempt, and I realized very quickly that I went a little crazy making these roses and I made them a little too big. I keep picking them up and realizing, well, no, that one's too big, no, that one's too big. So I grabbed the little one, and then I decide to go ahead and fill in the spaces where the bigger roses won't fit with smaller roses. A lot of it is positioning, making sure that they're in the right place. And then I just get started with piping. I quickly also realized this was a very big time learning experience for me, that this way of piping roses on this Lazy Susan was not fun. It was not easy. I couldn't get the angle I needed in order to make them pretty. It was easier than it just being stationary, but I didn't quite 100% like how the roses came out. They still look pretty, don't get me wrong, but I think my second attempt turned out much better. With these roses, I tried to have white piping soap with what I thought at that time was a very thin line of dark pink or red, but it ended up being a little bit too thick and I didn't like that either, so for the next batch I made the line a little bit smaller. As you can see on the bag, it looks really thick. It should be a lot thinner than that, just to give it kind of a hint of a sometimes, depending on how it comes out of the bag, a gradient. And so it's a lot of work to go in here and pipe each one individually and make sure you don't bump the rose that's next to it once it starts filling up. And of course the soap frosting has to be the perfect consistency, and you have to work relatively fast, depending on your ingredients and your recipe, because it could start to get hot in your hand, which happened to me once, or it could get so solid that it's a little difficult to squeeze out, and you don't really want to kind of massage the soap in the bag too much, especially if you have multiple colors like this, so you have to try to work as fast as you can. Once the soap, I find, gets to a certain point, it can get a little hot a little fast for the recipes that I use. I did end up really liking the dual color roses, so I think I'm going to experiment a little bit more with that. Just like I said, a much thinner line to make it realistic, or a little bit more realistic. And as you can see, it's a little difficult to get in all those nooks and crannies. And you saw the cut there. I tried to put that flower on there, but it was just way too big for the empty space. So I ended up having to pipe a lot of these little roses. I think most of the time I'm overthinking what I'm going to do, where I'm going to place it. Is that a good spot? Is that not a good spot? And I always go crazy with the roses. I always seem to make them too big. I mean, these should be little buds, and instead I'm making them pretty large. I think by that time I realized, oh, this should be smaller. Let me make a little bud instead of a big old open fully rose. And I guess with time and more practice, I'll have a better eye of where the rose needs to go. I think here I'm analyzing, okay, where should I put the next rose? How am I going to do it? How am I going to squeeze the piping tip in between these roses without smushing the previous petal, and make it look nice and make it the right size so that it fills in enough space to look nice, or at least nice enough, because the soap's going to be cut, so it's not going to be 100% visible. But it is pretty difficult, it is pretty time consuming, but it is incredibly fun. And if your soap frosting doesn't get all hot on you and very solid, it's really fun and relaxing. I mean, just looking at the roses as you're piping them and seeing your hard work turning into something very beautiful is very rewarding. And if somebody else appreciates it, it's even better because it's something you created that you really love. And other people do too. It's really nice. Especially because this takes so long. Here I'm just piping some leaves just to make it look a little bit prettier. Just the bare roses alone, I was not liking that look. So I decided to mix some green soap frosting and fill in all those empty spaces with leaves. This was also one of the first times, the first time I piped leaves with soap. So there is a bit of a difference between actual frosting that you can eat and soap frosting. And I think I prefer the soap frosting to real frosting. The real frosting, oh no, it's very different to be able to get it so that it has a nice pointy tip. With the soap, it's a little bit easier, or maybe it's easier for me, I don't know. I invite you to comment and tell me if you have piped with soap and with actual edible frosting. I'd like to know which one you prefer, which one's easier for you, or maybe neither is easier, I don't know. Some of these tips on these leaves, they did end up getting cut off, but for the most part, most of them are pretty sharp, and they actually do look really cute like leaves. And my thinking here was to not leave any empty space at all, just roses and leaves, just beautiful roses with just green, dense, beautiful. And I think part of why that is might be because I live in the desert and it's just very dry, it's just dirt, dust storms, and so I just wanted this beautiful garden, green, lush top, just full of green. I know I'm saying green a lot, but I mean it. I wanted it to just be happy, green, pretty. And so here I'm working hard to make sure every little space is filled with green. Green, green, green. I think at this point I probably needed a touch up on my manicure as well. One of my gel colors had peeled off on my hands. Please excuse that. In order to make it easy on me, I prefer peel off gel paints for my fingernails than soak off polish. It's just a lot easier, if anybody's curious. And there I go. Every little nook and cranny. Green, green, green. Must be green. Does it pass my seal of approval? It must be green. One thing I was thinking about after I piped all of these green leaves is that I had put the coupler on my piping bag. What I should have done was changed out the piping tip to make different sizes of leaves. I have a few different other tips, and I should have maybe changed it out to make a smaller one and a bigger one just to break it up a little bit. I think I decided not to. I don't know why. I think I was manually trying to make bigger and smaller leaves just by trying to control how much I squeezed it and how long I let the tip stay close to the soap. So for a bigger leaf, I would squeeze the piping bag closer to the soap and leave it squeezed and then gently pull up. And for those longer, thinner leaves, I would kind of just squeeze and pull at the same time so that I would have multiple sizes of leaves. But then when I used the smaller tips or the larger tips, I could definitely see a difference in not only the size but the leaf shape. Then I think it would have made it look a lot prettier and nicer, maybe in a more subtle way. Maybe somebody that has made something like this before would notice. I would likely notice, but probably only if it's my soap design. I do have a lot of tips that I have now collected to try to make more of these designs. Different leaf tips specifically to make little leaves, big leaves, different types of leaves. So I look forward to making more of these rose-topped soaps in the near future. And of course, that's when I decide that every little nook and cranny was filled, and I waited, I think, impatiently and cut it 12 to 24 hours later. And at this point, my intention for the inside of the soap was to be this beautiful drop swirl. And when I say drop swirl, it was a drop swirl that I was trying to swirl from very, very high up, not from close down so that it looks like drops. I want it to be big and swirly. But unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. It was a bit of a combination between both of them. But I think it worked out okay. It worked out in my favor because the insides kind of look flowery, like tulips. I think they remind me of little tulips on the inside once it's cut. I'll only show 1, 2, or 3 bars here, just because the video is a little long at this point. But I love to watch people cutting soap, and I love to cut the soap. It's so pleasant to watch somebody's hard work, and they get to cut it and talk about their whole process and what they liked about it, and maybe what's going on in their lives. Whatever it is that they want to talk about, it's very entertaining and nice. See, that one looks like a tulip. It's upside down, but it's a tulip. I'm curious, do you see anything other than a tulip? Do you see a different type of flower? Just some weird shapes? Just something nice, pleasant to look at? I'm curious to see. Can you leave me a comment? And here at the end, I'll show a picture of the finished final cut and what it looks like. Thank you everybody for watching.